So welcome to this session of SVT Dharma Talks. And we'll start off with a Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, and today I'm looking at a sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya. It's in the Book of the Sevens, and it's sutta 71 called Development. And this is a really interesting sutta. It's quite short, but it references a lot of material. And I'll expand some of the referencing that I go through by referencing into Majjhima Nikaya 77. That's called the Maha Sakuludaya Dayi Sutta. And what's important here is to recognize the nature of development. And there's a wonderful description of that as we go through this sutta. So let's start. Bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu is not intent on development, even though they form the wish, may my mind be liberated from the taints by non-clinging. Yet their mind is not liberated from the taints by non-clinging. For what reason? Because they lack development. So without the intent, without intention, chaitana, for development, then we can just simply go through the motions and we won't see the same results. So this is showing us the primacy of chaitana, and chaitana is the most important of all the sankharas. In fact, chaitana, intention, gives access to understanding and to the operation of the sankharas. If we have clarity of intention, that opens the doorway to using the sankharas for the purpose of self-development. Without that intention, the sankharas kind of just operate on their own. So the quality of intention is very important. And I would even recommend that before you do each practice, set an intention, not in the sense of an outcome, but perhaps in the sense of a process. To set the intention simply to watch movements of mind from one state to another. And that sets a clarity in our mind so that we can return back to that intention frequently, particularly after we've siksād. Lacks development of what? One, of the four establishments of mindfulness. So this is the using the body, feeling, mindsets, or the citta, and dharma phenomena in the mind as the objects of attention. Principally being able to see when they arise, when they persist, and when they disappear. And if we can cultivate this capacity to develop mindfulness, to be able to see the impact in the body, with feelings, feeling particularly because of the link through to craving with feeling. So if we think of feeling here as sensation and not emotion, and then we've got the citta, which is, if you like, we can look at the hindrances as part of that. We're looking at, if you like, mindsets, the texture of the mind as we're going through and how it arises, how it persists and how it ceases, and then the phenomena in the mind itself. And this is the cultivation. Are the hindrances present? Are the factors of enlightenment present? And seeing which of these aspects of our mind are being developed according to our intention and our attention. Secondly, the four right strivings. Now, what are the four right strivings? And this is where it's useful to reference back to Majjhima 77. And here it describes the four kinds of striving as initially zeal for the non-arising of unarisen, evil, unwholesome states. Now, what is this zeal? Well, zeal is an enthusiasm, if you like. Zeal is also, if you like, if we look back into the Pali, it's the word chanda. It's an impulse, a will. Now, we can have a zeal for many things. And so chanda itself is not of itself a guarantee that our effort and our will is being directed in the right way. So we have to qualify what our effort is. And the qualification here, or the will that we put in, is that it should be for the non-arising of unarisen, unwholesome states. So here we're seeing the connection into the 6 R's, because what we're looking to do is maintain our connection with the object of our observation. And when that object of observation is lost because our mind has got caught in something else, then it's important that we should make an effort, arouse energy, exert our mind, and put that into a sort of dynamic process, which is described here as striving. But we've got to be very careful with the word striving here, that it's not a tense striving. No, it's a collected striving to allow us to move in to the direction that we need to go. Okay, just hold on a moment, please. Okay, apologies for the delay. I have been waiting for someone to arrive for 2 days. All right. Okay. So when we're looking at striving, 4 kinds of right striving, it's important that we awaken enthusiasm, we make effort, we arouse energy, we exert our mind, and we strive. And that striving is this collectedness, which gives us a focus to that enthusiastic effort. And what we need to recognize with the striving is it's not a focus which is narrowing. It's a broad focus. It's a wide focus. So we need to retain the peripheral awareness. So having exerted the zeal for the non-arising of unarisen states, he also, or the practitioner, awakens the zeal for the abandoning of those states that have already arisen, and for the arising of wholesome states that have not yet arisen, and for the continuance, non-disappearance, strengthening, increase, and fulfillment by development. So this sutta in the Anagutta Nikaya is all about development, by development of arisen wholesome states. So what we have here is a very clear description of the 6 R's. And with the 6 R's, it embraces the whole of right striving. So the 4 establishments of mindfulness are required, the 4 right strivings, the 4 bases of psychic potency. So this has a sort of an exotic feel about it in the way that it's described here. But if we look back at Majjhima Nikaya 77, the 4 bases of spiritual power are, again, this enthusiasm, this zeal, this chanda, this direction of will, but it needs to be directed in a particular way. When we direct it and accompany it with determined striving, so this is the striving that we were talking about with the right striving, we develop the basis for spiritual power consisting in concentration, so that's the collectedness that we use within the TWIM, due to energy and determined striving. They develop the basis of spiritual power consisting of collectedness due to purity of mind. And the purity of mind comes from the application of the 6 R's. And they develop the basis of spiritual power consisting in collectedness due to investigation. Now, investigation is very important here because investigation gives us understanding. So what is the investigation we're looking at? Well, if you think about it, in order to see the process of the 6 R's, we must be investigating mind states. We must have seen that there was a mind state, that we've moved away from that, something else has appeared, that when we work with that in a particular way, that then disappears. The wholesome state reappears because we redirect the mind towards the wholesome, and then we persist with the wholesome. So we're investigating the nature of moving from one mind state to another, which Bhante Vimramsi would describe as the purpose of meditation. So here we're directing our effort and our enthusiasm and our will in these directions. Remember, chanda is amoral. Desire, effort, zeal, this is amoral. The only moral quality comes from how we choose to direct that attention. And that's where the mental and behavioral development comes, because we've directed it in a particular form. And this is the teaching of the Buddha. How do we direct our effort? So we've looked at the 4 establishments of mindfulness, the 4 right strivings, the 4 bases of psychic potency. And then we have the 5 spiritual faculties. Now, what are these? Well, these are very important as well. These are all aspects of our experience that we need to gradually develop. And we don't need to get stressed about developing them. They are things that evolve as we practice. And one of the beautiful things around Bhante Vimramsi's teaching is because he taught about tension and its release, and he taught about the 6 R's, and we were coming back to a wholesome state, which is the loving kindness, then what he's shown us in that process, or what he's described in that process, is a way of practicing which gradually evolves on its own. And part of that evolution is developing these aspects as well. So what are the 5 faculties? Well, if we look back into Majjhima Nikaya 77, we see that with one of them is the faculty of faith. Now, faith can feel a loaded word, particularly in the West. But faith here, the word for faith here, can equally be translated as confidence. So one of the things that's really wonderful around the Buddha's teaching is that he described that if you start to work this way, it becomes immediately effective. Well, we see this in the 6 R's. As we gradually train and see that we release away from tension, we do notice that there is a sense of relief, that we are dropping craving, even if it's just momentarily. And because of that, we begin to see the benefits of the practice. We find that it's difficult to sustain certain states of mind when we use the 6 R's. So this, from a very early stage in the practice, means that we build confidence and faith. When we develop the faculty of faith, this leads to peace. This leads to enlightenment. Well, enlightenment doesn't have to be a single endpoint. We can have a process of continual enlightenment as we go through this. We develop the faculty of energy. Yeah? Well, as we begin to see things working, begin to develop the confidence in them, it's natural for our energy to pick up. Yeah? But we have to be careful with energy not to become over enthusiastic. So in a recent retreat I was on, one of the people there was asking me, how do I stop becoming overexcited as things begin to work? This is sometimes a response people have when they're sitting. They become, the energy builds. And so we need to be able to ground at that time. We need to be able to bring up tranquility at that time as part of that balancing process. With the faculty of mindfulness is another of the 5 faculties. And this mindfulness is remembering to see or to pay attention to the way mind states move. So again, as we begin to use the 6 R's, we're cultivating this sense of mindfulness in this way. And mindfulness is another of these amoral qualities. We can be mindful doing something which is completely inappropriate. And we can be mindful working on spiritual and personal development. Again, it's the intention behind it. So this again underlies the importance of intention. We need to direct our practice in a way which is supportive for the development of understanding. And then the faculty of collectedness and the faculty of wisdom. So the faculty of collectedness is, as we work with the 6 R's, we increasingly develop this collectedness of mind. And remember, the collectedness of mind is not this narrow focus. If we have this narrow focus, we don't see the context of our experience. And the 6 R's are all about seeing the context, seeing how mind's attention moves, rather than just simply holding mind's attention in one place. Because it's in the seeing what causes the movement that we develop wisdom. And this is the faculty of wisdom. And how is that the case? Well, it's because we begin to see directly dependent origination playing out. And as we begin to see dependent origination playing out, then our wisdom begins to build. And we see these causal links between our experience and how it develops and how it conditions the next moment, and how we can interrupt that process when that's moving in an unwholesome direction. And what does it mean to move in an unwholesome direction? It's when we take our experience personally. It's not just when, there's this phrase here, evil, unwholesome states. And we could have a projected image of what evil represented. But I think the best way to think of evil here is not in some sort of moral quality, but in terms of some activity of the mind, which is taking us away from the capacity to develop the insight. And so anything that takes us away from the capacity to develop insight is moving us in the wrong direction. And the things that prevent us taking or developing that insight is when craving arises, because craving closes your mind down. And so craving occurs when we take some things personally. And so the wisdom is around seeing the impact of not taking things personally and how to do that. So these are the 5 faculties. And we have to work. We have to develop these. So there's a striving to be done here. And then after the 5 spiritual factors, we have the 5 powers. Now, what are the 5 powers? Well, they are exactly the same as the 4 bases of the 5 faculties, but now they're becoming more automatic. So as we have made the effort to work with the faith, with the energy, with the mindfulness, with the concentration and the wisdom, just like as we work through in the TWIM meditation, and the 6 R's, first of all, are quite a mechanistic way of working with the mind. And then as we begin to develop, it becomes more subtle. And after a while, and our capacity increases, then it begins to take on an energy of its own. And then towards the higher states of understanding, we're almost unaware of the 6 R's taking place because they're automatic. And in the same way, the 5 powers move from being the 5 faculties when they become automatic. And so, if you like, the will behind them doesn't have to be so dominant, because they're automatically occurring. And then we have the 7 factors of enlightenment. Well, these are the ultimate expression, I think, of balance. And with the 7 factors of enlightenment, we have an interesting juxtaposition between different aspects of our experience. So, first of all, we develop the mindfulness enlightenment factor, supported by seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, and results in relinquishment. Well, that's the mindfulness factor. But to develop this mindfulness, we need this aspect of these factors of enlightenment in balance. So we need to develop the investigation into states. Well, remember what Bhante Rams's description of meditation was. Observing how mind's attention moves from one state to another. So here is the investigation of states. The next is the energy enlightenment factor. Well, we need to balance energy. Too much energy and we're restless. Too little energy and we're in danger of sloth and torpor arising as a hindrance. So restlessness is a hindrance, sloth and torpor is a hindrance. So in the sutta talking about the lute and the tuning of the lute, if the lute is too slack, it doesn't make a resonant sound. If it's too tight, it doesn't make a resonant sound. It needs to be tuned just so. And so how do we do that? Well, if there's too much energy, we need another enlightenment factor to be brought into mind, and that's tranquility. If we're too tranquil, then we need another enlightenment factor, which is the energy. So we have a pairing of these 2 enlightenment factors that we need to use to keep our practice in balance. And as we develop sometimes all we need to do is set an intention for tranquility to counteract restlessness, or set an intention for energy, often expresses more interest in what's going on, to counteract sloth and torpor. Then we have the rapture enlightenment factor. And so this is a sense of joyfulness. Now, joyfulness is great, but if there's too much joy, again, we could have this restlessness. So we need to enable us to balance these, and we balance them with the opposing enlightenment factors. And those are the enlightenment factor of collectedness, of tranquility, and of equanimity. So we have initially the investigation, we have the energy, we have the joy, and we have tranquility, we have collectedness, and we have equanimity. And in the middle here is mindfulness, which gives us the balancing. Now, Bhante Viramsay would often say the actual balancing, the pivoting thing, he felt was joy. Because joy, the smile and the rest of it was a balancing aspect to the practice. So if you find it easier to think of joy as a balancing practice, then use that. Because it's the energy and the investigation. So the investigation, if you like, is too much, working with insight too much. And we need to develop some calm, so the tranquility and the equanimity balance off the investigation at times. And then the too much energy, we can use the tranquility to balance the energy. One of my teachers used to say, don't worry about the mindfulness, you can't have too much of that. Okay. All right. So, and then finally, what we need to develop is the Noble Eightfold Path. And we won't have time to do this today, but there's a lovely aspect of the Eightfold Path, which Bhante Viramsay used to describe as the Eightfold Path is entirely embraced in the smile. So if you keep a smiling practice going, the Eightfold Path is being developed. So how did we get to this point? Well, what we said was that when a student is not intent on development, even though they form the wish, may my mind be liberated from the taints of non-clinging, yet their mind is not liberated by these taints. For what reason? Because they haven't developed the 4 establishments of mindfulness, the 4 right strivings, the 4 bases of psychic potency, the 5 spiritual faculties, the 5 powers, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the Noble Eightfold Path. And those are collectively called the 37 requisites of enlightenment. But not to worry about them, because one of the things about the TWIM meditation is that as we practice, even in its most basic form of working with the loving kindness, working with the 6 R's, we are automatically beginning to develop these 37 requisites. So we don't have to start to pick them out and think, how do I develop this? How do I develop that? This is an ongoing process as we practice. Suppose then there was a hen with 8, 10, or 12 eggs that she had not properly covered, incubated, and nurtured. Even though she might form the wish, may my chicks pierce their shells with the points of their claws or beaks and hatch safely, yet the chicks are incapable of doing so. For what reason? Because the hen had not properly covered, incubated, and nurtured their eggs. So what's important here is we need to nurture the environment that allows the eggs to hatch. Remember what's happening here. The hen is creating the environment. the eggs then develop of themselves. So we need to create the right environment for the 37 requisites of enlightenment to develop of themselves. And the key thing to this is chanda, the intention we have, the attention we give, because attention then controls our access to consciousness and our relationship to tension. One of the underlying teachings or foundational teachings that Bhante Brahmransi brought through was the need to have a relationship to tension. So too, when a student is not intent on development, even though they form the wish, may my mind be liberated from the taints of non-clinging, yet their mind is not liberated from the taints of not clinging because they don't develop these 37. When a student is intent on development, even though he does not form the wish, may my mind be liberated from the taints by non-clinging, yet their mind is liberated from these taints. For what reason? Because of his development of the 37 requisites. So we don't have to be grabbing hold of the need to be liberated. Liberation is a natural consequence of developing the 37 requisites. And the 37 requisites are a natural consequence of working with the meditation, the TWIM meditation as described and taught by Bhante Brahmransi. Suppose there were a hen with 8, 10, or 12 eggs, and she had properly covered, incubated, and nurtured them. Even though she might not form the wish, may my chicks pierce their shells with their points of their claws or beaks and hatch safely, yet the chicks are capable of doing so. For what reason? Because the hen had properly covered, incubated, and nurtured the eggs. So our responsibility is to create the right environment and then let the process happen. So too, when a bhikkhu is intent on development, even though he does not form the wish, may my mind be liberated from the taints by non-clinging. Yet his mind is liberated from the taints by non-clinging. For what reason? Because of his development of the 37 links, 37 requisites of enlightenment. And this is where there's this wonderful paragraph. When bhikkhus, a carpenter or a carpenter's apprentice, sees the impressions of his fingers and his thumb on the handle of his adze. So an adze would be that you would cut away at the wood with. He does not know, I have worn away so much of the adze handle today, so much yesterday, so much earlier. But when it has worn away, he knows that it has worn away. So too, when a student is intent on development, even though he does not know, I have worn away so much of the taints today, so much yesterday, so much earlier. Yet, when they are worn away, he knows they are worn away. So this is really important. Don't look for a particular outcome from your practice. But over time, see the direction that it's moving in. So over time, the wooden handle of this tool is gradually worn away. Begin to see an impression of the fingers and thumb. But there was no point at which there wasn't, and then suddenly there was. It's a gradual process. And that's how the Buddha described the development. It's a gradual process. How do we qualify that against the common phrase which says it's immediately effective, to be seen by the wise, here and now, relevant and applicable? Well, that's the 6 R's, if you like. We can see when we apply the 6 R's that things change, but that change is a momentary change. Now we have to build those momentary changes together so that over time, they result in behavioral change. And it's the behavioral development, the development of the mind, which is like the adze angle. We suddenly realize that we're not so angry so much, or we don't react in these ways, or we don't hold on to things in the way that we previously did. There isn't a moment that that happens. It happens and develops over time. Suppose, students, there were a seafaring ship bound together by lashings that had been worn away in the water for 6 months. It would be hauled up on dry land during the cold season, and its lashings would be further attacked by wind and sun, inundated by rain from a rain cloud. The lashings would readily deteriorate and rot away. So too, when a student is intent on development, his fetters readily collapse and rot away. So what I take away from this sutta is it's a kind of a sense of relief that I'm not expecting immediate results, that there's a gradual process coming on, that I need to work with cultivating an environment. And sometimes that will go awry and then I'll have to recultivate it. But to have the understanding that with the cultivation of this environment, progress will be made, and not to feel that I need to make progress. All I need to do is work with the environment. And as Sister Kima would say, one of the things that's really helpful with this is to think of the triplet: dana, sila, bhavana. Generosity. Generosity is a great thing to develop. Bhante Vimaras used to say generosity was just giving a smile away. That's an act of generosity. Sila, why sila? Because it's your umbrella to protect you against the hindrances. And so this is cultivating an environment. Then the practice, working with the 6 R's, working with loving kindness. And what comes out of that mix is bhavana, development, which is the title of this sutta. Okay, so that's quite a lot to take on board from a very short sutta. Let's just sit for a moment. Floor or with your chair. Softly rotate your inner thighs towards the midline of the body to release your hips. Drop the inner edge of your shoulder blades to open up around your heart. Let your spine release. Relax any holding and bracing around your brain. Gently smile. Connect to your chosen object of meditation. Connect to sense of contact, gently smile, take a deliberate breath in and out, and softly open your eyes. Okay, so any reflections on what I've said, and any questions about that or any other aspect of practice? Yes, Andre.
Yeah, I know you got to run in just a few minutes, but yeah, thank you very much for sharing this sutta. It's to me, what it spoke is just again pointing out the impersonal aspect, well, of everything, and that there's no I in the practice, right? It's just trying to create the conditions, trying to be the hand, and then the process takes it over, and it and it doesn't matter in the slightest what we want or what we don't want, right? It's just nothing to do with what's actually happening. So it's a nice way of looking at it. And tomorrow during my sit, I'm going to be thinking about this hand when I first get into the meditation. So it's nice to imagine yourself as sitting on these 37 eggs, so to speak. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. What we want or what we don't want in the sense of the craving is certainly doesn't apply. But remember, we need to give direction to intention. And so, we set the intention and then we get out of the way.
Right.
Yeah. And so if you like, the brooding hen there is the observing mind. Yeah. Okay. Anything else anyone would like to ask? Any other questions around the gradual development or the cultivation of the right environment? Just to reflect on the fact that when we use the 6 R's, we're literally coming back to creating the right environment. So every time we're away from that, we 6R and we come back. Anything else? Any further questions? Okay, so let's share some merit. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much indeed. May your practice go well. Goodbye now.